The first thing Rosalie Finch felt was pain. Not fear, not confusion, just pain. Fierce, blinding, endless pain. Her breath came in broken gasps. Grit filled her mouth, and blood clung to the shredded edge of her dress. Somewhere behind her, the echo of gunfire rolled across the valley like far-off thunder. She tried to move, but agony tore through her leg. The wagon trail had vanished. The sky above spun, a pitiless blue that offered no comfort. Faces of her future students flickered in her mind, the chalkboard waiting in that tiny frontier schoolhouse near South Pass City. Then her vision dimmed again. A frail sound slipped from her lips, too soft to reach beyond the pine-covered slopes of the Wind River Range. Her bonnet lay beside her, crushed and streaked with mud. Ants crawled over the fabric. She hadn't the strength to brush them away. Night had fallen when she'd last remembered fleeing. Two men stepping from the brush, eyes wild with hunger and whiskey. The wagon driver had shouted once before the world exploded in chaos. Rosalie had leapt, tumbled down the rocky embankment, and disappeared into the trees. Since then, everything had been a fever of shadows and pain. Now the sun blazed high, pressing down without mercy. Sweat and blood slicked her skin. When she touched her thigh, the wound pulsed hot beneath her fingers. Her stomach lurched as she saw how deep it ran, edges swollen purple and caked with dirt. "Please, someone," she whispered, half to herself, half to the open sky. A horse snorted nearby. She froze, heart pounding. A figure moved between the trees, broad shoulders, a worn hat, a rifle resting behind the saddle. For an instant, terror seized her. Maybe the bandits had returned. Her trembling hand reached for a stone, but she was too weak to lift it. The man knelt beside her. His voice was low, steady, almost kind. "Easy now. You're hurt bad." He smelled of leather, sweat, and the faint bite of whiskey. She caught the blue in his eyes. Calm, alert, sure. Her lips trembled. "My leg. It's swelling fast." He looked down, his jaw hardened in the sunlight. The wound was angry and hot, rising under the skin. He uncapped his canteen, rinsed his hands, and studied her face. "If we don't tend this soon, you won't see tomorrow." Her heartbeat quickened. His words mixed with the whisper of pines and the buzz of flies circling her wound. Far below, the Sweetwater River flashed in the sun, distant and cold. Rosalie tried to speak, but only one thought filled her mind. Who was this man? And why did his calm voice make her believe she might live? The sun burned higher through the thin mountain air. Rosalie blinked against the glare, lips cracked, skin pale. The man, Eli, wet a cloth and laid it gently across her brow. "Stay with me," he said, voice rough but gentle. "You're safe now." She nodded weakly. "Who are you?" "Just a man who's seen too many bad mornings," he murmured, glancing toward the trail, his horse pawed at the earth uneasy. "Name's Eli McCrae." He checked her wound again, squinting against the harsh sun. The skin around the cut was tight, angry, and fever-hot, his brow furrowed. "You weren't wrong. It's swelling fast." Rosalie bit her lip, the pain shooting up her leg and into her chest. "Am I going to lose it?" she whispered. "Not if I can help it," Eli replied, pulling a bottle from his saddlebag. The sharp scent of whiskey filled the air. "This'll burn like hell, but it'll keep you breathing." She tried to laugh, but the sound broke into a gasp. "You sure you know what you're doing?" A faint smile crossed his face, one lined with old memories. "Used to patch up worse than this back in the war." He poured the whiskey straight over the wound. Rosalie cried out, clutching at the dirt as the fire ripped through her leg. Eli steadied her with one firm hand, murmuring, "Breathe, teacher, breathe." He tore a strip from a weathered red scarf, one that looked older than he was, and tied it tight around her thigh. Then, crushing a handful of dry herbs in his palms, he mixed them with a bit of water from the canteen. "Old trick from an army medic," he said. "Yarrow and comfrey. They'll draw the heat out." Her eyes fluttered open. Why, help me, she breathed. You don't even know me. Eli's gaze lingered on her before drifting toward the tree line. Out here, no one makes it alone. That's reason enough. He lifted her gently, propping her against his coat. Silence filled the clearing, thick, heavy as the mountains themselves. The wind carried the dry scent of sage and dust, and somewhere high above a hawk's cry echoed. Rosalie's breathing steadied, her trembling eased, though the pain still pulsed beneath the bandage. Eli crouched beside the Sweetwater stream, refilling his canteen. When he looked back toward the ridge, his expression hardened. Boot prints, fresh ones. He swore under his breath. Rosalie followed his gaze, her pulse quickening. What is it? He didn't answer. Instead, he reached for his rifle, checked the chamber, and spoke softly, calm as a storm about to break. Looks like we've got company. Then he turned to her, jaw tightening. Stay still, teacher, no matter what you hear. The sound of boots scraping on dry earth shattered the quiet. Eli froze, his fingers loose on the rifle, eyes like sharpened glass. He leaned close to her, voice barely above a whisper. Stay quiet. Don't move. Not a sound. Rosalie clutched the red scarf at her leg. Each breath came sharp and shallow. The air felt heavy, still. Even the flies had gone silent. Then, from the trees, a voice called out, rough and slurred. Hey there, stranger. Mind sharing what's in that pack of yours? Eli rose slowly, brushing the dust from his shirt. Two men stepped from the brush, guns low and eyes mean. They looked like they hadn't slept in days. Faces cracked from sun and dust, clothes torn, eyes hollow. Rosalie recognized them instantly. The same men from the trail. Eli's voice stayed calm, low as gravel. Ain't much here worth stealing, just a hurt woman and a few herbs. Best keep riding. One of the men sneered. A wounded woman, huh? That so? Maybe we'll see for ourselves. Eli's thumb rested lightly on the hammer of his rifle. Take one more step and you'll be limping home. I don't warn twice. They laughed, though it wasn't the sound of courage. More the kind of laugh men give when they're afraid to stop. Dust danced between them, gold and thick in the sun. The taller one shifted his weight. We just need supplies, mister. Times are hard. Don't make it worse. Eli's stare didn't break. Then turn around before you find out how bad hard can get. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. The wind sighed through the sage, then, like a string snapping, both men went for their guns. The crack of Eli's rifle shattered the quiet. The bullet bit the dirt an inch from their boots. They stumbled back, eyes wide. That was your warning, Eli said evenly. The next one won't miss. Something in his tone carried the weight of graves, the sound of a man who'd already buried more than he cared to count. The bandits backed off slow, muttering, until the trees swallowed them whole. Eli waited until the sound of hooves faded into the wind before lowering his rifle. Rosalie's eyes were wide, her face pale with disbelief. You didn't kill them, she whispered. He shook his head. Didn't have to. Out here, sometimes mercy hits harder than lead. She tried to smile, though her lips trembled. You're a strange man, Eli McCrae. Maybe, he said softly. But you're still breathing, teacher. That's what counts. The air carried the scent of sage and gunpowder. The sun dipped low, washing the cliffs in gold. For the first time since the ambush, Rosalie let her head rest back and her eyes close. Safety felt fragile, but it was there, like a hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Eli watched the ridgeline, rifle still in hand. He knew it wasn't finished. Men like that didn't scare easy. Hunger and whiskey twisted a man's soul worse than fear ever could, and in country like this, desperate men always came back. By late afternoon, the air hung thick as wet wool. Dark clouds gathered over the peaks, low and heavy. Eli sat beside Rosalie, wiping her fevered brow with a damp cloth. Her lips were pale, her breath shallow. The swelling on her leg had crept higher, tight, angry, alive with heat. He muttered under his breath. Infection. If I don't cut it soon, she's done for. Rosalie stirred weakly. What are you saying? Stay still, he said, voice calm but cold. I've got to drain it. It's the only way. Her trembling hand gripped his arm. Will it hurt? Eli met her eyes. Yeah, but pain's better than dying. He took a deep breath, poured whiskey over his knife, and held it near the fire until the blade glowed dull red. The scent of hot metal filled the air. Rosalie turned her face away, whispering a prayer under her breath. "Hold on, teacher," Eli said quietly. "You're stronger than you think." The blade met her skin. Rosalie's scream tore through the canyon, raw and echoing. Eli's jaw locked tight. His hands didn't shake. A trickle of thick yellow fluid spilled from the wound, mixing dark with blood. Eli worked fast, cleaning it, pressing herbs in deep and binding it tight with clean cloth. Rosalie's eyes fluttered open for an instant, glassy and far away before sinking halfway closed again. She wasn't awake, just floating somewhere between fever and pain. Eli sat back, chest heaving, gaze locked on her pale face. The minutes dragged like hours. Slowly her breathing steadied. The fever's heat began to fade. She was still alive. He leaned against the stone wall, wiping sweat from his brow, when a sound snapped through the quiet. The brittle crack of a twig, the shuffle of boots. He muttered a curse under his breath. Those same two men hadn't gone far. They'd circled back. Moving quick, Eli grabbed his rifle, checked the chamber, and slipped behind a boulder. The voices came low and mean. "Finish it. Take the horse." "No food left at camp," one whispered. "That horse is our way out." Eli waited until one stepped into the open. Then he kicked a rock, sending it tumbling. The bandit turned toward the sound, and that was all the time Eli needed. 2 sharp shots rang out. One struck the dirt at their boots. Another split a branch overhead. They stumbled, slipping in the wet sand by the riverbank. The alkali mud clung to their boots like tar. Before they could rise, Eli was on them, striking one with the butt of his rifle, dragging the other down by his collar. "The fight ended fast. You're done now," he said flatly, tying their wrists with rough rope. "There's a deputy in Lander who'll know what to do with you." The men spat curses, but Eli didn't listen. He turned back to Rosalie, still lying where he'd left her. The setting sun brushed her face in soft gold. He knelt beside her, voice low. "You're safe now." But as he looked west, the wind shifted, carrying a distant rhythm, hoofbeats. Slow, steady, coming closer. His hand tightened on the rifle. Was it help or another kind of trouble? By morning, the world was washed clean. The storm had broken in the night, leaving everything still. The hoofbeats turned out to be a patrol from Lander, led by Deputy Howell. They hauled the outlaws away without much talk. The deputy said they'd been tracking rifle fire down the ridge since dusk. Justice came slow out here, but it came all the same. Eli stayed behind with Rosalie. Her fever broke with sunrise. When she opened her eyes, he was still there, sitting by the fire, hat tipped low, the red scarf folded neatly beside her bedroll. "You didn't leave," she whispered. He lifted his eyes, a tired grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. Didn't have anywhere better to be. For days he tended her, feeding her broth, changing the bandage, talking just enough to keep her from drifting away. She learned he once had a wife and a son, both lost to fever years ago. Since then, he'd ridden alone, mending fences and helping strangers when he could. She listened quietly, and something inside her softened. Pain recognized pain. Weeks later, when she could walk again, Eli rode with her to South Pass City. The schoolhouse waited on a lonely hill of wild grass, its paint peeling, its bell rusted but still standing. Eli helped her down from the horse, his rough hands gentle. "This where you start over," he said. Rosalie looked from the old windows to his weathered face. "We both start over, I think." He stayed for a while, built her a porch, mended a fence, even carved a little box for chalk and books. Every morning before the children came, she'd see him sitting by the gate, coffee in hand, pretending to fix something that wasn't broken. And every day he left before the bell rang. No promises, no words. Just presence. Soon, folks in town began to whisper that the ranch hand and the school teacher were keeping each other alive. Maybe they were right. By autumn, the hills had turned gold again. Rosalie's limp was nearly gone. Eli still came by, sometimes with supplies, sometimes with a story, sometimes just to sit. One evening, she poured him a cup of tea and smiled. "You know, I never did thank you properly." He chuckled softly. "You're alive. That's thanks enough." They sat in quiet as the sun sank behind the mountains, and for once neither felt alone. Out here in the West, folks learned that kindness could save as sure as a gun. That justice wasn't always loud, and love didn't always need to speak. So maybe that's the real question. Between law and mercy, between survival and love, which would you choose when no one's watching? If this story touched you, give it a like, share it with someone who still believes in quiet heroes, and subscribe for more tales from the wild heart of the American West. Now pour yourself a cup of tea, lean back and tell me in the comments, what time is it where you're listening from, and what did this story make you feel?